So you may have come across the idea of waxing a cycle chain, and the internet is absolutely full of information about it and different ways and different techniques. Nobody's really addressed the question of, is it worth waxing a tandem chain? So I thought I'd carry out an experiment for a year, and this is my 4-month review really of how it's gone. And for those of you that have not really come across it, well, what is waxing all about? I'll give you a brief overview. The basic problem is that oil is a liquid and it's viscous and the chain is always wet. With wax, we've got a solid material that is dry to the touch. So with oil, what tends to happen as we use it, as you know, it gets thicker and it gets blacker as it accumulates dust and dirt. And then you end up with this black grinding paste, which is wearing away the components, making you absolutely filthy every time you touch it. But it is a tried and technique that's been used forever, really, since chains were invented. With wax, the aim is that it remains clean because it's dry, dust and grit particles will fall off and not be incorporated, and because it's not forming this grinding paste around the rollers inside, the chain doesn't wear away. But it is a bit of an extra faff, particularly at the beginning. I'm not going to go through the process because there's thousands of videos on the internet about how to do that. But the underlying problem that we get with a new chain is that it is covered in factory grease, and that will prevent the adherence of wax, but it's also not a very good lubricant. Its aim is to stop the chain from rusting while it's being stored. So the first thing we have to do is to clean it, and we prepare it, we clean back to the metal, and that is quite a long, laborious stage, or it can be. We then add the wax in some shape or form. Now I dip it into a pot of hot wax that we've got that's molten. I then allow it to cool off. I fit it to the bicycle, to the tandem. I fit it to the tandem, and then I will run it. It's got low friction, it cleans, stays clean, and I just wipe it down with a microfiber cloth or a brush to keep it clean. And then about every 100 to 200 kilometers, maybe more, then I will reapply some wax. So it involves regular maintenance, but it's not actually that difficult once you've done the initial preparation. So what was the appeal of a wax chain for me as a tandem owner and rider? Well, the first thing is we carry our tandem on the roof of the car, and we often get covered in thick, dirty black grease when lifting it onto the roof rack and fixing it. We've got 2 chains, so that doubles the amount of wear we've got and doubles the amount of places where you can get filthy. When we're riding, occasionally we've popped a link or we've dropped a chain, and then you just get messy putting it back together again. And the same goes for when you get a rear puncture. Maintenance is also cleaner because you're not getting filthy black. We're also saving money on chains and gears, which is all good theory, and the timing chain doesn't need adjusting anywhere near as frequently, and supposedly it is saving us energy as we ride. So let's have a look at what I have found as a result of this trial. During the 4 months, we've done about 500 miles across Exmoor, the Yorkshire Dales and Kent. So we've been doing a lot of riding. So we've got a reasonable idea of where it's going, but we'll also review at the end of the year too. So my favourite thing to get out of the whole process is the cleanliness. There is no doubt that having a completely clean chain that you can put your hand on is brilliant. It's clean to the touch. We can put it on the roof of the car, and I've not had a scrap of dirty grease on me since then. After long dusty rides, I literally just take a brush and give it a quick wipe down. And particularly our winter clothing, where you're dressed up and you've got baggy bits and pieces and it can get in the way, and your winter gloves, etc. And it also made me a little bit happier when we're out to do quick adjustments on the drivetrain. So I'm giving cleanliness a grade A because it's spectacular. So what about this low friction side of it? Well, we've got 2 chains, and so it does make a difference. They've got twice as much friction, technically, approximately anyway, than on solo bikes. And what it felt like was that I almost I had an extra gear to play with because the friction was less. I could definitely feel it when it's freshly waxed. However, I didn't feel the same thing on my solo bike. Solo bikes, I think it's quite hard to physically feel the difference. Gear changes, well, I actually think that they were a little tiny bit more clunky. It doesn't slide up on it except when it's freshly waxed, and I know when it's time to re-wax because the clatter begins, and that's really frustrating if it happens at the beginning of your ride. So I'm going to give the low friction side of it a grade B because I definitely can feel a difference with the 2 chains. So what about the usual criticism that people have that it takes an awful lot of extra time? Well, I would definitely say that for the initial preparation, it is a lot more faff. You've got to keep the chains clean and you've got to really scrub off every last bit of grease before you even begin. And then it takes a while to do the initial waxing, even when you're dipping it. It's not a long process, but it is time-consuming process because you keep having to go back to it. Now, if you're doing topping up and you're just using a drip-on wax, it's really just about as easy as using oil, but you must remember to do it the night before. So you need to make sure you've got a dry chain. And I've learnt, do not use the cheapest drip-on wax. Buy a good quality wax. Re-dipping, once you get to that, is dead easy. And actually, for those who've got a little bit more time, I would say re-wax the chain, and really enjoy the fact that you can have a lovely smooth chain. And so for all the faff of it, I'm giving it a grade C. If you didn't have a lot of time, I would say it would almost come out as a grade D because it is extra work, but it suits a retired scientist like myself. So does it extend chain life? And I think the answer to that is probably, but I can't confirm it at the moment. It's very hard to tell. We've done about 2,000 kilometres all told with those extra long rides that we've been doing that have been straining it. As far as the timing chain is concerned, I would say that when it's freshly waxed, you put it on and then almost immediately you notice the fact that it doesn't fit the way it did when you first had it on. And that's because everything is now centred up and there's lots of wax all around the rollers. So it takes a little while. If you run it for about 20 to 40 revolutions, then you'll be able to tension it up afterwards. The drive chain, does it wear? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but we haven't actually recorded any wear at the moment. But what I would say is that if you're out on a long ride, there's no harm in carrying a spare pre-waxed, pre-cut chain in the bottom of your pannier or in your bag. So if you pop a link out on site, rather than the usual faff of cutting links out, you can just take the chain off and pop the new one in place. And I'm awarding that a grade B. So what about the problems? Well, I'd definitely say the drive chain is last on the lower end of predictions that most of the websites will make for waxed chains. About 150k is the maximum before you have to really think about re-waxing it. You can tell it because it gets really rattly. The other thing that we've found out is that really the quick links, KMC quick links work really well. I've had some cheap ones and they've been a complete nightmare. So I would not cheap out and buy budget Chinese quick links. They do not work. Now, as far as the quality of chains is concerned, I've used two manufacturers, Shimano chains and KMC, and I would actually say that Shimano so far have given no problems. The KMC have hot some outer links, which has happened to us before. It's the external plates that just pop off, and then that can actually bend your cassette, so you have to be a bit careful. The other problem that you definitely will experience is rust. Rust occurs if you leave the bike in the rain and it stays wet overnight. So if you're going on a long tour, I would argue that actually possibly oiling and traditional oil is the way to go. If not, then keep it covered overnight. Certainly if you're touring, then you cannot re-dip, and so you're entirely dependent upon the drip-on. But if you're going touring somewhere that's going to remain very dry, then the rust is not likely to become a problem. And I would say on a tandem that the waxing lasts less time the more hills you do. So when we've been riding in the Yorkshire Dales across Dartmoor with those 20% hills that you get there, then the life is maybe down to 100k. Of course, on a solo bike it would last a lot longer. There's far less strain upon the chain. So I'm giving the problems a grade B because they are there, but actually they are really not insurmountable at all. So let's just sum up what we found for those of you that are thinking, is this something I should try or is it something I should stay away from? So in summary, just to pull it all together, cleanliness, I would say, is absolutely brilliant. If you're lifting your bike on and off the car, particularly off the roof or on a very long rack on the back of your car, if you're somewhere where you can actually get away with that and you get grease on yourself, then this is definitely the way to go. It's super clean. You've got clean hands and clothes, and then it gives you the willingness to just get on and do stuff. If your riding consists mostly of day rides and short tours, and you're an older, say more casual casual rider and you're not putting the strain on the drive chain, you may well get much more duration out of it. And what we found is that though when you do 10 to 20% climbs, as we do when we're on the big hills, then that kills the wax much more quickly. So I'm comparing there my experiences in Surrey and Sussex against Dales and Dartmoor. As far as the whole faff process goes, I would say you've got the space and you get organised around it, then re-dipping on a regular basis is a brilliant way to go. You get so used to it, you can just literally clip off the chain and via the quick link, if you've got the right quick link pliers, run some boiling water over the chain, it comes clean, dry it off a bit, drop it in the wax, pull it out, let it drip off or cool off, and then reattach it. And because it's clean, it's no great effort at all. So if you've got a bit more time and you're a very organised person, I think this is actually going to be a very low intervention process. You could actually do it very, very easily. So it doesn't take 5 minutes to unclip the chain using a pair of quick link pliers, drop the chain off, clean it under, I just run boiling water over it, and then I pop it, once it's dried, pop it back into the wax and bring it out and then let it harden off, and then at that point I can reattach it. As far as the getting the captain's and the stoker's pedals aligned, which is always quite a tricky thing when putting the chain on, I've built a jig to keep the pedals in line. It's just a piece of aluminium with slots that clamp around the pedals and hold them exactly parallel to each other, and then it's very easy to reattach the chain. And of course, rust is the one thing that's very difficult to deal with. So if you're on a long wet tour, get a good quality oil lubricant or a rustless chain. But for those of you that are fair weather or going on long good weather tours, then I would say wax is a great way to go, particularly if you've got the time. So thank you for sitting through this so far. We're the Tandem Channel, and what we do is we take rides across the UK in different places and we record it minute by minute, surface conditions, so that you can make your own choices as to whether you like the ride or not, or whether you think it's suitable for yourselves, and you can make good judgments based on being able to see the conditions as they are on site. So we'd love it if you could help us by liking any of these videos, that you subscribe to the channel, and why not put a comment at the end? You know, what's your view on waxing chains? Is it too much? Is it not? We'll let you know again at the end of the year what our response is. Until then, bye for now.